We talk about depression like it's a modern crisis. But what if one of the greatest minds of the 19th century already mapped it out? Raw and unfiltered, long before psychology even existed. We live in an age where nearly everyone knows someone struggling with depression. The terminology is clinical now. DSM codes, neurotransmitters, SSRIs. But back in the 1800s, there was no language for this kind of pain. No therapist's office, no diagnosis, no safe space to unpack the weight pressing on your soul. And yet, there was this one man, living in silence, walking alone through forests and mountains, tormented by pain in both body and spirit, exiled from the academic world, misunderstood by almost everyone around him. But still, he wrote, he thought. He stared into the void and described what he saw in words no one had ever used before. His name was Friedrich Nietzsche, and he wasn't a psychologist, but he saw depression for what it really was. Not just sadness, not just low mood, but a crisis of meaning. A spiritual paralysis, a profound disconnect from what we've been taught life is supposed to be. And what's wild is, Nietzsche wasn't even trying to diagnose depression, he was trying to survive it. His work doesn't read like a psychology textbook. It reads like a soul screaming into the void, looking for something solid to hold on to. And that's where it gets powerful. Because long before Freud, Jung, CBT, or any pop psychology influencer on TikTok, Nietzsche was already asking questions we still don't know how to answer. Questions that punch straight through the noise. What do we do when life loses its color? What happens when truth turns to dust? How do we find the strength to keep going when everything inside us wants to stop? This video isn't just about Nietzsche as a historical figure. It's about how his thoughts, raw, controversial, spiritual, can help us understand what depression really is beneath the surface, and why healing might have less to do with fixing and more to do with transforming. Stay with me till the end, because we're going to unpack how this philosopher's darkest moments might just shine a weird, fierce kind of light on your inner journey. Especially if you've ever felt like you're stuck in the fog, wondering what the point of it all is. Let's start with what most people get wrong about Nietzsche. They think he was just this angry, arrogant guy yelling, "God is dead," like some edgy teenager. But that line, "God is dead," wasn't a celebration. It was a mourning. It was the terrifying realization that the old meaning structures had collapsed. The spiritual scaffolding that held society and the individual together had crumbled, and nothing had replaced it. He saw that loss of faith wasn't just a religious problem, it was an existential earthquake. And it left people wandering, hollowed out, unanchored. Nietzsche was living in the ruins of belief, and he didn't try to sugarcoat it. He didn't say, "It's all going to be okay." He said, "If you stare into the abyss stares back." And this is where his insight becomes spiritual. Nietzsche understood that what we call depression today wasn't just emotional or chemical. It was a collapse of personal meaning. When the story we tell ourselves about who we are and why we're here no longer fits, something inside us fractures. He called this the nihilistic crisis, and he lived it. Not from a distance, but right in his bones. Nietzsche suffered from chronic illness, migraines that left him bedridden for days, rejection from academia, failed friendships, no romantic relationship, and a loneliness so intense it's hard to imagine. But instead of running from it, he turned toward it. He listened to it. And in that listening, he found something powerful. He wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." That chaos and inner storm wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new, but only if you're brave enough to face it. Before we continue, if you're someone who loves expanding your mind and exploring the deeper layers of life, make sure to subscribe to Fractal Wisdom to never miss the insights that help you think, feel, and live more consciously. And now, we're going deeper into Nietzsche's vision of how to survive the storm of depression without losing yourself, and how what he called the Übermensch might actually hold a surprising key to healing. Let's start by clearing something up. The term Übermensch often gets misinterpreted. Pop culture and internet memes have twisted it into this macho, superiority-obsessed idea, like Nietzsche was talking about some kind of alpha male Superman. That's not it at all. The Übermensch isn't someone who dominates others. It's someone who transcends their own inner ruins, someone who rebuilds meaning from scratch after everything they believed in has collapsed. Someone who goes through the existential fire and comes out reborn. In other words, it's not a concept of power over. It's a metaphor for inner alchemy. When Nietzsche spoke of depression, though he never used that word, he described it as a kind of spiritual death, a time when everything we thought mattered falls apart. What we thought was solid turns to dust. It feels like the center of life has vanished, and we're left wandering without a compass. But here's where Nietzsche flips the script. He didn't see that collapse as failure. He saw it as initiation, like a rite of passage, a descent into the underworld of the psyche, what some spiritual traditions call the dark night of the soul. To Nietzsche, depression wasn't the enemy. Denying it was, because buried inside that darkness is a hidden invitation to confront the illusions that no longer serve us and give birth to something more authentic. That's where the Übermensch comes in. So, how do we walk that path? How do we live through the collapse without becoming permanently lost? Nietzsche never gave us a step-by-step manual, but his writings offer something better: psychological and spiritual tools for the soul. Here are 3 of them. Number 1. Amor fati, the love of fate. This wasn't just about accepting life, it was about embracing it, all of it. The beauty, the suffering, the joy, the pain. Nietzsche called us to stop resisting the uncontrollable and instead say, yes, this too belongs. Not as passive resignation, but as an active yes to life. He wrote, "My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different." Think about that. Depression often feeds on rejection of the present moment. Why me? Why this? Why now? Amor fati turns that on its head. It says, even this moment has value. Even this pain might hold a key. Number 2. Becoming who you are. Nietzsche believed most people were living lives shaped by society's scripts, playing roles, chasing approval, living in fear of judgment. Depression, in a strange way, exposes the cracks in that system. It forces us to ask, whose life am I really living? The Übermensch isn't someone who's perfect. It's someone who has broken free of the old masks and dared to ask, what is true for me? It's the birth of authenticity through pain. Number 3. Will to power, not control, but creative energy. Another misunderstood term. Nietzsche's will to power isn't about controlling others. It's about the drive to grow, to transform, to become. Even in our lowest moments, there's often a flicker of energy inside that wants to evolve. That's the will to power. It's not loud or flashy. Sometimes it's just the whisper that says, keep going. Nietzsche didn't offer easy answers. He never said, think positive. What he offered was honest, and sometimes brutally so. But that's also what makes his work real. He knew that healing isn't always about feeling better. Sometimes it's about waking up, tearing down the false stories, standing in the rubble of your old life and asking, what now? Not as a victim, but as a creator. That's the path of the Übermensch, not someone above suffering, but someone reborn through it. And what's wild is, he saw all of this 100 years before mainstream psychology even began to explore these ideas. Before we had words like identity crisis, or existential dread, or shadow work, Nietzsche was already sitting in it. He wasn't diagnosing from the outside, he was feeling it, living it, and writing through it. And that's why his insights still resonate so deeply, especially for those of us who've walked through our own inner winters. Before we go further, take a moment to think about this. What if your darkness isn't a detour, but the beginning of your real story? Because now, we're going into Nietzsche's ideas on suffering as a catalyst for transformation, and how he challenged the very idea of happiness itself. This is where it gets real. In our culture, happiness is marketed like a product, smooth, shiny, easy to digest. Just meditate more, think positive, eat kale, optimize your morning routine, smile through the pain. If you're not happy, something must be wrong with you, right? But Nietzsche saw that kind of happiness as shallow, a kind of sedation. He wasn't interested in temporary highs or surface-level good vibes only thinking. For him, happiness wasn't the goal of life. Becoming whole was, and wholeness doesn't come without walking through your shadows. He said it simply, what does not kill me makes me stronger. That phrase has been tossed around so much it's practically lost its teeth. But Nietzsche meant it in a far deeper way than the bumper sticker version. He wasn't glorifying pain. He wasn't saying, suffering is good for you, like it's some twisted reward system. What he meant was, suffering is inevitable, but it can be used. It can shape, forge, and awaken you, if you face it consciously. Let's think for a moment. In a society trained to avoid discomfort at all costs, what happens when we stop running from pain and actually listen to it? Nietzsche saw pain as a spiritual pressure point, a signal that something inside us wants to evolve. Depression, anxiety, grief, they don't show up to destroy us. They show up when our current reality can no longer contain the truth of who we are becoming. And that's where suffering becomes a threshold. Nietzsche wrote, to live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. But here's the twist. He didn't mean we should force a fake meaning onto our pain. He meant that meaning emerges when we engage with the suffering itself, when we let it teach us, shape us, strip away the lies, and show us who we really are. So what does that look like in real life? Let's say someone loses their job. On the surface, it's a crisis, a collapse. Depression follows, shame kicks in, the world feels unstable. But under Nietzsche's lens, this isn't just misfortune, it's initiation. The end of one identity and the beginning of another. A death and a potential rebirth. If that person listens to what the pain is actually saying, this job was never aligned with your soul, or you've outgrown this version of yourself. Then something shifts. The pain becomes not the end, but the fire that transforms the metal. That's evolution. That's the hidden wisdom of suffering. Nietzsche's entire philosophy rests on this radical truth. There is no transformation without discomfort. The brighter the light, the deeper the shadow. The higher the consciousness, the greater the responsibility to integrate the darkness that comes with it. This is why Nietzsche rejected the soft, feel-good definitions of happiness. To him, happiness wasn't comfort. It was resistance met with courage. He wrote about the spirit of gravity, that force inside and outside of us that tries to keep us down. Doubt, fear, inertia, society's expectations, our own inner critic. And he asked, what if true happiness isn't about escaping that weight, but dancing with it? The image he used is powerful. The tightrope walker. A figure walking a rope stretched over the abyss, balancing between chaos and control. Always one misstep away from the fall, but still walking, still becoming. To Nietzsche, that's what real happiness looked like. Not perfection, not safety, but movement toward becoming. Owning your pain, making something from it, turning breakdowns into breakthroughs, not in a cheesy way, but in the most grounded blood and bone kind of way. And maybe that's what we're all doing. Balancing on that rope, failing, rising, questioning, and growing. Not chasing happiness, but chasing truth. And that truth often hurts before it heals. Nietzsche didn't offer comfort. He offered courage, a mirror and a challenge. And when you start seeing your suffering not as punishment, but as initiation into deeper layers of being, something wild happens. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this waking up in me? That shift changes everything. And now, take a moment and ask yourself, what part of your life looks like a breakdown, but might actually be a breakthrough in disguise? Because now we're going to talk about Nietzsche's final and most misunderstood idea, eternal recurrence, and why it holds the key to not just surviving life's pain, but radically reframing it. It's not just a philosophical concept. It's a spiritual bombshell. And it might be the most important question you'll ever ask yourself. Because this idea isn't just about time or metaphysics or some abstract theory. It's a mirror Nietzsche holds up to your life, and it asks, what if you had to live this exact life over and over again, forever? Not just the good days, not just the highlights or the healed version of you, but every single moment, every awkward silence, every heartbreak, every panic attack, every confused hour staring at the ceiling in the middle of the night, wondering what the hell you're doing with your life. All of it, on repeat, for eternity. Could you say yes? Would you? This isn't about punishment or about karma. Nietzsche wasn't saying this is what will happen. He was asking, what if that were the case? Because if you couldn't say yes to living your life exactly as it is, then maybe something needs to change. This was Nietzsche's spiritual pressure test, his ultimate filter for meaning. He believed that if you could affirm your life, every wound, every regret, every messy chapter, and still say yes, then you were truly alive. You weren't just existing. You were choosing your life, not sleepwalking through it. And that's what most people miss. Eternal recurrence isn't about time. It's about love. The deepest kind of love. The kind where you look at your own life and, even with all its scars, you say, I would do it all again, because it made me who I am, and I'm still becoming. Most people spend their lives trying to get away from pain, from their past, from their mistakes, from their trauma. But Nietzsche flips the question completely. Can you live in a way that even your worst days become part of something meaningful? Not because they were easy, but because you became someone from them. And that's where this all ties together. We've talked about the abyss, the collapse of old meaning, depression as spiritual death, the chaos within, the storm, the rebirth, but eternal recurrence. That's the moment where the story stops being random and becomes sacred. Imagine this with me. You're not here to just get through life. You're here to create a life you could say yes to, even if it repeated forever. That doesn't mean you'll love every moment. Nietzsche didn't. He suffered more than most. Physical agony, mental torment, isolation, breakdown. He died in silence and obscurity. But what he left behind was a blueprint for conscious living. A life not built on comfort, but on depth, freedom, radical responsibility, making meaning out of pain, not by bypassing it, but by reclaiming it. When you embrace the idea of eternal recurrence, every moment becomes holy. Every choice counts. Every second has weight. You stop waiting for life to start after you heal. You stop delaying joy. You stop blaming fate. And you start asking, if I had to live this moment forever, how would I live it differently? What would I say, do, or feel if this wasn't just passing time, but eternity in disguise? This is the heart of Nietzsche's psychology before psychology. This is why his words feel like medicine for people who've hit rock bottom. He didn't offer fake hope. He offered freedom. The freedom to own your pain, to shape it, to rise from it, not as someone trying to get back to normal, but as someone who's been forged by it. He believed in a kind of soul strength that isn't taught in schools, a kind of sacred rebellion, where instead of chasing the light, you become it, by standing in your truth, unapologetically, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. So here's where we land. If you're someone who's struggled, who's questioned everything, who's felt the void and kept walking, then Nietzsche's not just some dead philosopher. He's your secret ally. He's the quiet voice that says, yes, this life is hard, but it's still yours. Own it, shape it, love it as if you chose it. Because in the end, that's the only way we find peace. Not by erasing our darkness, but by learning to walk with it, and even dance with it. Thank you for staying through this whole journey. This wasn't just a video about Nietzsche, it was a video about you, about how you see your life, and how you can reshape it, one conscious moment at a time. If this spoke to you, subscribe to Fractal Wisdom for more soul-shaking ideas like this. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's in their dark night and needs a spark. And remember, the abyss only stares back if you forget that you're the one with the fire. You've got this. Keep walking.